But what we witnessed yesterday was not dissent. It was not disorder. It was not protest. It was chaos. They weren't protesters. Don't dare call them protesters. They were a riotous mob, insurrectionists, domestic terrorists. It's that basic, it's that simple. And I wish we could say we couldn't see it coming. But that isn't true. We could see it coming. The past 4 years, we've had a president who's made his contempt for our democracy, our Constitution, the rule of law clear in everything he has done. He unleashed an all-out assault on our institutions of our democracy from the outset. And yesterday was but the culmination of that unrelenting attack. He's attacked the free press, who dared to question his power, repeatedly calling the free press the enemy of the people. Language at the time he first used it, I and others said, has long been used by autocrats and dictators all over the world to hold on to power, the enemy of the people. Language that is being used now by autocrats and dictators across the world, only this time with the imperator of an outgoing president of the United States of America. He's attacked our intelligence services, who dared tell the American people the truth about the effort of a foreign power to elect him 4 years ago, choosing instead to believe the word of Vladimir Putin over the word of those who've sworn their allegiance to this nation, many of whom had risked their lives in the service of this nation. He deployed the United States military, tear-gassing peaceful protesters in pursuit of a photo opportunity in the service of his reelection, even holding the Bible upside down. The action that led to an apology from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and an outspoken denunciation of the use of military for domestic political purposes from scores of former military leaders and secretaries of defense, led by Secretary Cheney. He thought he could stack the courts with friendly judges who would support him no matter what. They were Trump judges, his judges. He went so far as to say he needed 9 justices on the Supreme Court because he thought the election would end up in the Supreme Court and they would hand him the election. He was stunned, truly stunned, when the judges he appointed didn't do his bidding, instead acted with integrity, following the Constitution, upholding the rule of law, not just once or twice or 3 times, but over 60 times. Let me say over 60 times. In more than 60 cases, in state after state after state. And then at the Supreme Court, as judges, including people considered, quote, his judges, Trump judges, use his words, looked at the allegations that Trump was making and determined they were without any merit. Nothing was judged to put this election in question or doubt by any of these judges. You want to understand the importance of democratic institutions in this country? Take a look at the judiciary in this nation. Take a look at the pressure it was just subjected to by a sitting president of the United States of America. At every level, the judiciary rose to the moment during this election, did its job, acted with complete fairness and impartiality, with complete honor and integrity. When history looks back in this moment that we've just passed through, I believe it will say our democracy survived in no small part because of the men and women who represent an independent judiciary in this nation. We owe them a deep, deep debt of gratitude. And then there's the attack on the Department of Justice, treating the Attorney General as his personal lawyer and the department as his personal law firm. Through it all, we would hear the same thing from this president. My generals, my judges, my attorney general. And then yesterday, a culmination of an attack on our institutions of democracy. This time, the Congress itself, inciting a mob to attack the Capitol, to threaten elected representatives of the people of this nation, and even the vice president, to stop the Congress from ratifying the will of the American people in a just completed free and fair election. Trying to use a mob to silence the voices of nearly 160 million Americans who summoned the courage in the face of a pandemic that threatened their health and their lives to cast that sacred ballot. I made it clear from the moment I entered this race that what I believe was at stake. I said there was nothing less at stake than who we are as a nation, what we stand for, what we believe, what we will be. At the center of that belief is one of the oldest principles this nation has long held. We are a government of laws, not of men, not of the people, of laws. I said it many times in the campaign. Our democratic institutions are not relics of another age. They're what sets this nation apart. They're the guardrails of our democracy. And there is no president. That's why there is no president who is a king. No Congress that's a House of Lords. A judiciary doesn't serve the will of the president or exist to protect him or her. We have three co-equal branches of government. Co-equal. Our president is not above the law. Justice serves the people. It doesn't protect the powerful. Justice is blind. What we saw yesterday in plain view was another violation of the fundamental tenet of this nation. Not only did we see the failure to protect one of the three branches of our government, we also saw a clear failure to carry out equal justice. I don't know if you used to say in the Senate, excuse a point of personal privilege. A little over an hour and a half after the chaos started, I got a text from my granddaughter, Finnegan Biden, who's a senior in her last semester at the University of Pennsylvania. She sent me a photo of military people in full military gear, scores of them lining the steps of the Lincoln Memorial because of protests by Black Lives Matter. She said, "Pop, this isn't fair. No one can tell me that if had been a group of Black Lives Matter protesting yesterday, they wouldn't have been treated very, very differently than the mob of thugs that stormed the Capitol." We all know that's true. And it is unacceptable, totally unacceptable. The American people saw it in plain view. And I hope it sensitized them to what we have to do. Not many people know it. When Justice Garland and I were talking, we talked about, I think he raised it, the reason for the Justice Department was formed in the first place. It was back in 1870. We didn't have a Justice Department before that, the cabinet. It was formed in 1870 to enforce the Civil Rights Amendment that grew out of the Civil War, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, to stand up to the Klan, to stand up to racism, to take on domestic terrorism. This original spirit must again guide and animate its work. So as we stand here today, we do so in the wake of yesterday's events that could not more have vividly demonstrated some of the most important work we have to do in this nation. committing ourselves to the rule of law in this nation, invigorating our domestic and democratic institutions, carrying out equal justice under the law in America. There is no more important place for us to do this work than the Department of Justice that has been so politicized. There's no more important people to carry out this work than the people I'm announcing today. More than anything, we need to restore the honor, the integrity, the independence of the Department of Justice in this nation that's been so badly damaged. And so many former leaders of that department in both parties have so testified and stated that. I want to be clear to those who lead this department who you will serve. You won't work for me. You are not the president or the vice president's lawyer. Your loyalty is not to me. It's to the law, the Constitution, the people of this nation, to guarantee justice. For Attorney General of the United States, I nominate a man of impeccable integrity, Judge Merrick Garland, one of the most respected jurists of our time, brilliant yet humble, distinguished yet modest, full of character and decency. The Supreme Court clerk served in the Justice Department during the Carter, Bush 41, and Clinton administrations, where he embraced the department's core values of independence and integrity. A federal prosecutor who took on terrorism and corruption and violent crime, always with the utmost professionalism and the duty to the oath he swore. Nominated by President Clinton to be a judge on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, considered the second most powerful court in America. Throughout such a long and distinguished career, Judge Garland has earned the praise and admiration of members of bench and bar and politicians of both parties. And despite his busy schedule and prestigious positions, he still makes time to volunteer regularly, tutoring students in Northeast D.C., as he's done for 20 years. It's about character. It's about character. It was no surprise why President Obama nominated him, Judge Garland, to the Supreme Court. As I said, he embodies honor, decency, integrity, fidelity to the rule of law, and judicial independence. To those same traits, he will now bring, as Attorney General of the United States, not as a personal attorney to the president, but as the people's lawyer. He'll restore trust in the rule of law and equal justice under the law. And I fully expect, in discussions I've had, that he will receive a fair hearing and swift confirmation. And once he's confirmed, I will move promptly to nominate his replacement on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. And I expect that the distinguished nominee will receive a prompt and fair hearing as well. For Deputy Attorney General, I nominate one of the most selfless people I've worked with, one of the brightest I've worked with. I worked with her during the last administration. A 15-year veteran of the Justice Department, Lisa Monaco. Lisa knows the department inside and out. She is a definition of what a public servant should be: decent, trusted, honorable. And I might add, I embarrassed her a moment ago with the other colleagues, and selfless. I offered her other positions that are of greater consequence, quote unquote, more prestige. But she wanted to work with you, Judge. She wanted to go back to the Justice Department. A top flight prosecutor who took on public corruption, corporate fraud, and violent crime. Chief of Staff to the Director of the FBI, the first woman ever confirmed as Assistant Attorney General for National Security, where she elevated cybersecurity to a top priority, and where it's even more consequential today than it was then. At the White House, she was the top Homeland Security and counterterrorism advisor to President Obama and me in every one of the national security meetings. She coordinated our fight against al-Qaeda and ISIL. She helped lead our response to the Ebola crisis. When the bombs went off at the finish line on Patriots' Day in Boston, her hometown, she coordinated the federal government's response with local and state law enforcement to get to the bottom of this horrible tragedy. Lisa, I know you will help restore integrity and independence of the Department of Justice that you so revere. As Associate Attorney General, the number 3 job at the department, I nominate Vanita Gupta, a woman I've known for some time, one of the most respected civil rights lawyers in America. Started her career at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, then on to the ACLU, both organizations to which I belong, and then to the Justice Department during the Obama-Biden administration, where she led the Civil Rights Division. At every step, with every case, she fought for greater equity and the right to right the wrongs of a justice system where they existed. And she's done so by bringing people together, earning praise from across the ideological spectrum for her approach to solving some of the thorniest problems we face. During the Obama-Biden administration, Vanita was put in charge of investigating the abuse of power in police departments in Ferguson, Missouri, and other communities torn apart by acts of violence and racial injustice. She helped institute common-sense police reforms to build greater equity, safety, and trust. She was commended for her work by both law enforcement and those advocating for changes in the criminal justice system. That's a rare achievement, and it speaks volumes about her capacity to unite people in common purpose, which is what this is all about, uniting the American people. Born in Philadelphia, a proud daughter of immigrants from India. That sound familiar? If confirmed, Vanita will be the first woman of color to serve as Associate Attorney General. And I'm grateful that Vanita is leaving her current job, leading one of the premier civil rights organizations in the world, as she answers the call to serve once again to ensure that our justice system is even more fair and more equitable. Thank you. For Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, I nominate Kristen Clarke, who has spent her career advocating for greater equality and equity in our justice system. The daughter of Jamaican immigrants. Now, don't think this has been designed here. I'm still looking for an Irishman. All kidding aside, the daughter of Jamaican immigrants, Kristen, is also one of the most distinguished civil rights attorneys in America. A proud native of Brooklyn, New York, she began her career, her legal career, in the very same office she's now nominated to lead. Her previous tenure with the Justice Department saw her take on some of the most complex civil rights cases, from voting rights to redistricting challenges to prosecuting hate crimes and human trafficking. She's earned accolades throughout her career, including as the head of the Civil Rights Bureau for her home state of New York, where she's led the charge to end the school-to-prison pipeline and root out discrimination in housing and in law enforcement. She currently leads one of the nation's top civil rights organizations, where she promotes greater equity in voting rights, in our education system, in our housing system, in our justice system, and so much more. Now, she'll return full circle to pursue the vital work where her career began. The Civil Rights Division represents the moral center of the Department of Justice and the heart of that fundamental American ideal that we're all created equal and all deserve to be treated equally. I'm honored you've accepted the call to return to make real the promise for all Americans. To each of you, I thank you for your service, and to your families. And to the American people, this is a team that will restore your trust and faith in our institutions of democracy. I chaired the Judiciary Committee for many years. One of my goals in running in the first place, you may recall, I said when I saw those people coming out of the fields in Charlottesville, shouting hate, a young woman killed. And when asked, the president said there are good people on both sides. That's literally why I ran. There's no more important and heartfelt effort on my part than restoring the independence and integrity of our Justice Department. So may God bless you all. May God protect our troops and those who are sworn to protect the American people. Now I will turn it over to the team, starting with the next Attorney of the United States, Attorney General of the United States, Judge Merrick Garland. Thank you.
And we've been listening to President-elect Joe Biden there speaking from Wilmington in Delaware. The president-elect announced some of the names that will form his administration, but he unsurprisingly began by talking about the events on U.S. Capitol on Wednesday, saying it was one of the darkest days in the history of the country, and saying that the Trump supporters who forced their way into the building were domestic terrorists, mentioning that the attack on the Capitol was a result of Trump's unrelenting attack on democracy, that Trump was trying to use a mob to silence the voices of American voters. He also mentioned that there was a clear failure to carry out equal justice when compared to the response to various Black Lives Matter protests. Those are the words of Vice President and now President-elect Joe Biden. Well, let's go to Kristen Salumi, who is in Wilmington, where Joe Biden was speaking. What did you make of what he said? And also, he took this opportunity to talk about the various announcements he announced a little bit earlier about new people that will form part of his administration.
Absolutely. The president-elect began by describing what happened in the nation's capital with the assault on Congress as a culmination of 4 years of disregard for the Constitution and law and order by President Trump. And while he praised the judiciary, one of the three branches of government here in the United States, for its impartiality and independence, particularly in light of the pressure that the president was putting on many, including his own Attorney General, William Barr, to investigate voter fraud and alleged election interference. He praised the judiciary for not succumbing to that pressure. Of course, Bill Barr stepped down after declaring that there was no evidence of election fraud. All of that to segue into his choice for Attorney General, the person who would lead the Department of Justice, the highest law enforcement agency in the country, Merrick Garland. Garland himself is perhaps best known as someone who was nominated for the Supreme Court by Barack Obama, but failed to win that nomination because Republicans, led by Mitch McConnell in the Senate, refused to give him a hearing, choosing instead to wait for Obama's term to run out so that they could appoint a more conservative judge. But the president-elect seems here to be sending a message that one that fits with his promises on the campaign trail to reach across the aisle and appoint a centrist, someone that can do this job with impartiality. And Garland has been praised in that regard by people from both sides of the aisle. In fact, he is someone that Republicans have already said that they are likely to confirm. This, of course, as the department may, in fact, be charged with investigations of what happened in the Capitol, of President Trump's role in pressuring Georgia officials to find votes in the election there. And also investigations possibly into Joe Biden's own son, Hunter, who has been investigated for tax fraud as well. This said, the vice president or the president-elect was under some pressure from parts of the Democratic Party who wanted to see someone who would be a real go-getter on issues of police reform. Remember, during the campaign, the Black Lives Matter movement called attention to issues of police violence and racism in police. That was a big priority for the campaign and a big reason for his support among black voters. Many were hoping that he would nominate a person of color to that position, or perhaps a woman. Instead, he did nominate several women to serve under Merrick Garland with a strong history of working in civil rights. So using yesterday's events to make a case for his nominees for the Attorney General is what we heard here today.
Kristen Salumi with the latest from Wilmington, Delaware. Kristen, thank you. Let's go to Alan Fisher, who joins us live now from the White House. Alan, first of all, in the past few minutes, we know that Nancy Pelosi has been speaking as well, the U.S. House Speaker. She says that Trump committed seditious acts. She's been calling for Trump's immediate removal through the 25th Amendment and also saying that Democrats are pressing for impeachment. So for many people, really, the events of Wednesday were the tipping point. There have been some resignations from the White House. What else can you tell us?
Well, the 25th Amendment is a big step, but we've heard now from Chuck Schumer, who's the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, and also Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, and they have said it's time for the Republicans to act. All pressure goes on to Mike Pence. It's really up to the Vice President to take that action and to call together the Cabinet, and once a majority of the Cabinet agrees, go to the President and say he's being removed under the 25th Amendment. Nancy Pelosi suggesting if that isn't going to happen, then they will have another impeachment hearing. How would that work, particularly as Congress is about essentially to go away till after the inauguration? Well, they would have to call them back. There would have to be a hearing in the House, a vote there. It would have to go to the Senate very quickly. When it comes to the 25th Amendment, there could be a complication as well. We've just lost Elaine Chao from the Cabinet. She's the Transport Secretary. She's been there since the very beginning. She's also married to Mitch McConnell, who's the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, was very critical of Donald Trump when he spoke on Wednesday. The fact that she is going to resign on Monday, how does that work? Legally, what's the position with people who are about to resign from the Cabinet, or, as is the case with Donald Trump, many of them are in acting positions. We have an acting head of Homeland Security, an acting head at the Pentagon as well. It becomes a very complicated issue. But certainly the voices on the Republican side asking for Donald Trump's removal are growing louder as well. We've had a couple of congressmen say it's time for him to go. We've even had Larry Hogan, who's the governor of Maryland, a very popular man indeed, and expected to be one of those who will run for the Republican nomination in 2024, saying that Donald Trump has to go. What is interesting about Larry Hogan, here's an interesting parallel. When Richard Nixon was in trouble back in the 70s, he was doing okay, but when he lost the support of a congressman, he knew that at that point he really had to resign, because he said he was going to vote for the impeachment of Richard Nixon. Who was that congressman? It was Larry Hogan's father.
Remarkable. I mean, all of this is remarkable when you consider that President Trump just has, what, 2 weeks just about left in his term. So even while all of this is going on, he is actually continuing with his schedule today, isn't he?
Well, interestingly enough, the only comment we've had from the White House today was the fact that Donald Trump carried out a Medal of Freedom ceremony to two golfers, Gary Player and Annika Sorenstam, legends of the game. We know Donald Trump likes his golf, and he's given them medals of freedom. He also gave one to Babe Zacharias, who is also a golfing legend, but that is posthumously. She died in the 1950s. But have we heard anything about the actions of yesterday? No. Privately, we're hearing that Donald Trump is raging against the Vice President. He believes he's been stabbed in the back by Mike Pence, someone he says he saved his political career. Mike Pence was running for governor of Indiana, expected to lose that race 4 years ago when Donald Trump picked him out of the chorus line and decided he was going to be a star and make him the Vice President. So there are those who are suggesting that given that there are only 13 days left of the Donald Trump presidency, perhaps it wouldn't be the right thing to do to try and remove him from office, to take him away from such an important position where he wields a lot of power. But the critics say that's exactly why they should take that action, because there's 13 days left of the Donald Trump presidency.
Alan Fisher with the latest from the White House. Alan, thank you. Well, we've mentioned what she said. Let's hear from the lady herself. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has called on Vice President Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove President Trump from office. Let's listen.
The gleeful desecration of the U.S. Capitol, which is the temple of our American democracy, and the violence targeting Congress are horrors that will forever stain our nation's history, instigated by the President of the United States. That's why it's such a stain. In calling for this seditious act, the President has committed an unspeakable assault on our nation and our people. I join the Senate Democratic leader in calling on the Vice President to remove this President by immediately invoking the 25th Amendment. If the Vice President and Cabinet do not act, the Congress may be prepared to move forward with impeachment.
Nancy Pelosi speaking there. Well, Patty Culhane joins us live now from Capitol Hill. Patty, the real chorus of voices growing of people who think the president should be removed from office. Now, when we spoke 24 hours ago just about things were just kicking off, how does it feel now after 24 hours and I guess the dust has settled?
Well, they're still cleaning up the Capitol, going through offices, figuring out what was looted. One congressman said they stole a laptop. There were signs written about "we'll be back" and the media, murder the media. So it's going to take a little bit to clean that up. But really, it's a much calmer situation here. Right about 24 hours ago, I was being evacuated because there was a bomb threat, a suspicious package. But there are more questions than answers right now about how woefully unprepared Capitol Police were to deal with this. The situation right now, very different. About 2 blocks out from every street around the perimeter of these buildings, this complex, they have dump trucks and police cars. Now, the dump trucks are there because if you wanted to try and ram an explosive-laden vehicle into a building, you're not going to get through a dump truck. So they're really upping their security. We expect as many as 6,200 National Guardsmen are going to be here for the inauguration. They said there are going to be 850 new Guardsmen brought in today, a very strong police presence. Really, when I first got here in the morning, it was kind of odd. There was no National Guard anywhere, but throughout the day, you've been seeing them increase their presence, and they've also started to put up what they call a 7-foot unscalable fence around the Capitol building because they say that they are going to keep that there for 30 days, possibly longer. But overall, there's a lot of questions about how Capitol Police responded. We heard Joe Biden there say if these were Black Lives Matter protesters, they would have been dealt with very differently. Lots of questions, lots of calls for investigations, and lots of calls for the top bosses here in security to go.
Yeah, I mean, certainly those questions will continue in the coming weeks until some answers are got to. In the meantime, of course, the very session that the rioters wanted to stop did go ahead, and Biden's win was certified. What kind of reactions have there been since then, especially I'm thinking from key Republicans? Because we know a lot of Democrats are asking for the president either to be impeached or the 25th Amendment to be invoked. What about senior Republicans?
Well, you know, and this is going to be a key question. Do the Republicans stick with him? Remember, this is a president who said he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and not lose any support, and that has seemed to have held true for 4 years. But we're starting to see for the first time Republicans start to go, no, this is just a bridge too far. What they're going to be looking for is polling. They're going to see if what happened at the Capitol really does hurt his base political support, and that will determine whether Donald Trump remains this figurative head of the Republican Party. Now, politically, just to take a step back, now I'm not going to be cynical and say Democrats don't actually think that he's a danger and needs to be removed, but from a political calculation, if you're a Democrat and you think that in 2 years' time Donald Trump is going to be considered a toxic personality, that history will have turned on him, you want these Republicans to have to vote on a second impeachment, both in the House and possibly in the Senate. If Chuck Schumer is in fact in charge, he could make that happen. You want them on the record as saying, I'm a Trump supporter or I'm not, hoping that in 2 years' time, when it's time for every member of the House to run for re-election, you can say, look, now we think Donald Trump was bad, you supported him. So that could be part of the political calculation.
Patty, it's not great, I guess, when the media talks about itself the whole time, but you were just mentioning that on a door there was a sign saying, murder the media. So for journalists like you that cover politics, especially I'm thinking of the reporters that were possibly inside the building, I mean, how worrying was it then and how worrying is it still now that those rioters managed to get in when we know what they think about the media?
It's actually very, very terrifying. And it's not just the media. I've spoken with members of people who work in this building and in these office buildings, and they just feel like their entire belief system has been shattered. Up until this point, they thought, and what I was telling my friends and family yesterday, that this is the most secure building in the country. And it was proven that in just a matter of minutes, they could overtake it. And another thing I think that's going to be investigated, on the other side of the Capitol from where I was, the Associated Press was set up with all of their equipment, and the Trump supporters absolutely trashed it. I'm not sure if anyone was hurt, but there was a lot of media that really had to run from a mob. I think it's worth noting that I've covered a lot of these events in Washington. Never before have I needed security. Al Jazeera felt it was necessary to give me security guards on election night and on the night that the vote was certified. And I needed that security. One of the things I think a lot of people in Washington are wondering is this over? If you drive through the streets here, all of the businesses, all of the buildings, they're still boarded up. And there was one particularly aggressive Trump supporter who was really getting in our faces yesterday. And when the security guard, she had to push him back, he said, hey, we'll be back. So that is the concern. Is this actually over?
Yeah, it really is a concern. Patty Culhane with the latest there from Capitol Hill. Patty, as always, thank you. Well, the president's increasingly lost his ability to communicate with his supporters as social media platforms have blocked his accounts. Twitter suspended his account from posting for 12 hours following messages that the site said had a risk